always feel kind of humbled after that speech. It's so interesting to hear about all these endeavors, and I think kind of day to day we are involved in a few of these, but when we get that kind of overview, looking at this very broad reach of our work, it's sure a great feeling. So we can enjoy the chocolate along with that. We're going to move on now to the Health Authority Renal Program Showcase. This is year 3 for this showcase, and I'm not sure if the map is going to come up. We're going to have 4 speakers initially, and then we'll have a break and we'll conclude with that. But I think similar to this form and function idea that Dr. Levin was talking about, I like to always keep that in mind when you look at the map here and some of the geographic and sort of population density challenges that those of us in different health authorities are faced with. And I think we can kind of keep that in mind as we consider the initiatives that are being undertaken. So first on our list for today, Dr. Schachter and Julia Caryk from my home health authority, Island Health, are going to come and speak to us on the Nocturnal Patient Assessment Project.
Good morning. My name is Julia Caryk. I'm one of the clinical nurse educators in the VHA Renal program, and I was also the project lead when we started our nocturnal dialysis program in Victoria 2.5 years ago. I'm going to be giving you a quick introduction to our current state of our nocturnal dialysis program and just a quick glimpse into a little bit of the process that's brought it to what it is today. And then our nephrology lead for our nocturnal program, Dr. Schachter, is going to speak on some very hot-off-the-press research just done on our program by researcher Mark Saunders, who unfortunately could not present today, about some of the key determinants for modality success on the nocturnal program. But first, a live poll question. I want to get us into the mind of a patient. Could you personally adjust to sleeping 3 nights a week in a hospital? I know a lot of us did not sleep in our own beds last night. How did you do? So it looks like most people are not looking to spend 3 nights a week ongoing in the hospital, and some of us would require a strong sedative to get us there. And we have 20 patients in Victoria that do just this. Next slide. So we introduced our pilot program in February 2015, and we started with 12 patients. We have patients coming Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then a Tuesday, Thursday, Sunday group, and it's increased to 20 patient capacity, so we have 10 per group. It is located inside our in-center unit at the Royal Jubilee Hospital. Our patients, they run for a range of 7 to 8 hours per night. We have built in a bit of a flex on that to facilitate staff availability during the busy moments of hookup and takeoff. We try and encourage smaller gauge needles, angios preferably if we can, to promote access safety as well as ease of mind for the patients as they sleep and toss and turn. It is a RN-based system with more of a dependent program. We currently have 3 RNs during the night for the 10 patients, as well as a tech on. And there is some limited self-care expectation, but the nurses do the majority of the work. So most of us are aware that the literature for the health benefits of intensive dialysis show that patients who receive long-duration dialysis tend to have better survival rates, better cardiac outcomes, improved BP control. With the improved clearances of the long dialysis, we get better phosphate control and a reduction of phosphate binders and therefore medication burden for our patients. We also see better symptom control from the common symptoms seen in renal impairment and improved quality of life scores. As far as the benefits of bringing in an in-center nocturnal dialysis program, We look to overcome some of the obstacles for getting patients to a home-based therapy, such as fear of cannulation, lack of support available. We also want to allow them their days back by running them throughout the night while they sleep. They're able to go back to work, go to school, spend time with their families, and just get back to their lives. There's a lot on this slide. This was an adaptation on our patient selection criteria from the BCKD Nocturnal Hemodialysis Implementation Guide that was built. We have been actively at work reviewing our patient selection criteria. You can see on the left we have a list of patients situations where we would want to encourage nocturnal dialysis, patients such as those having the calciphylaxis or large fluid gains between dialysis treatments that are difficult to reach with the conventional 4-hour treatment. We also have done extensive work on our exclusion criteria and our reevaluation as well. And we've separated these into the absolute ones that frankly, the nocturnal program would not be a good fit for, and those that we may need to take a little further. As always, we're trying to accommodate patients to the best of our ability. Sometimes it's hard to find agreement on these criteria because we want to stretch them a little bit to get that patient to the modality they like. But we have really worked through these pieces, and this has been a trigger for the research that Dr. Schachter is going to speak of in a minute. Sorry, forgot to press my button. When patients come onto the nocturnal dialysis program, they do come and meet with an RN educator for a 1-hour orientation session. We go through the expectation of self-care. It's pretty minimal. It's similar to going to a community dialysis facility where they learn to take their own blood pressures, temperatures if they're able. They need to get themselves into bed, hold their own needle sites. We review some of the changes to their interdisciplinary follow-up. Our allied health and our nefs do not round on these patients. They're getting hooked up at 8:30 at night, leading to about 10:30. We should have them all on, and they're seen by phone interviews and by office visits. And this is a big change for our patients, especially ones coming directly from our in-center unit who are used to seeing a nef every run. We do review some of the reasons they would be discharged from our program. We have the temporary reasons, such as difficult access that needs to be assessed further, or if they're unwell and need to be hospitalized. We also have the more permanent reasons, such as they're not abiding by the patient agreement that they signed as far as behavior, or they've become medically unstable and they need further more assessment during their run. Our patients who run a nocturnal do have fewer vital sign monitoring overnight, and if they're in need of a lot of medications that require that increased monitoring, it's just not a safe program for them. We do ask patients to sign a patient agreement that we won't hold them to it legally, but we do ask them to try for a month to adjust to this new place to sleep and allow us to tweak their prescription to accommodate for their new modality. And it can take quite a few weeks to adjust their sleep, as you can imagine. As with any program, we've had growing pains, and I would say we're still on our learning curve. The patient-reported issues on our program, most of them, I would say it's a love it or hate it, and about 75% absolutely love it. We have had some disrupted sleep, as you can imagine. We had a bigger issue with snoring than we expected, which I guess some are sleeping, so they're snoring, that's great. But we had to move the louder patients into isolation rooms, and machine alarms are unavoidable at times. Our RNs and techs work hard to minimize this and try and keep the quiet hours as quiet as they can. Our patients are coming off at 4:30 in the morning. It's an early start, and we do try and maximize their sleep as much as we can. Patients have reported missing the face-to-face contact with the entire renal team as well. As far as leadership challenges, bringing in night shifts to an area that's, frankly, a lot of the nurses came to dialysis to avoid night shifts. It's not a popular shift. We do have difficult time covering the sick calls, and there was very high overtime rates for this for the night shifts. And it's also hard to ensure ideal staff experience. It's often the newer nurses that pick up these shifts, or the more experienced nurses would trade them off. And then you have some challenges with troubleshooting tricky patient situations in the middle of the night. Similarly, we have had to really look at balancing the staffing ratio and the funding with the patient acuity. We are trying to get the patients who most in need of extended dialysis onto nocturnal, and it can stretch a little bit and put a lot of pressure on the program. And this has led to the research done on the patient suitability. And I'm going to give it over to Mike.
Okay, so thanks to Julia. A big thanks, actually, because without her, the program wouldn't have gotten to the larger stage that it's at now, owing a lot to the hard work that she put in. So our program started as a pilot project back in 2015, and we wanted to take a sort of look after a couple of years and see where we're at, and see if we could make any predictions of which patients are going to succeed, and see if we can improve the program at all. So here's some of the data we collected. So the patients were about 63 years old who were enrolled in the program. They're 70% male. About 40% of them lived at home. They lived about 10 kilometers from on average, from the RGH unit, which is where we housed the pilot. And they're a fairly experienced veteran dialysis group with about 4 years of vintage behind them. 60% of them came from the RGH unit, and most of them were on a AVF or AVG. GN was overrepresented as a cause of ESRD. About half of them had GN, and 30% diabetic, and their mean Carlson comorbidity index gave them sort of a moderate burden of comorbidity. Here's some of their responses. This is a word map, so the size of the word is proportional to the frequency of that word in the surveys that we did. So improvement was big, trouble sleeping was big, freedom probably indicates that they have their daytime hours free. It's interesting to note that the mean medication tablet burden that they experienced went down quite startlingly over the first year. So they started off at about 71 tablets per week. By the 6-month mark, they were at 55 tablets, and then at the 1-year mark, they were at 39 tablets. Of some interest is the fact that the cost to the public payer did not, in fact, go down, which probably means that the cheap medications like phosphate binders were paired off, and some of the blood pressure pills. Our wait list was what I would say exceedingly long when the program started, up to 10 months when we were about 1 year in. And then we saw what I think we increased our capacity and worked through some of the pent-up demand. And now our wait list is closer to about 5 to 6 months, which is similar to other programs nationally. So there's a small number of patients waiting for a moderate amount of time. Temporary disruptions to nocturnal dialysis were common. 42 temporary disruptions in 22 patients. Half of our patients experienced a temporary disruption at least once. 1/5 had more than one disruption. About 10% of our scheduled nocturnal dialysis runs were missed because of these disruptions, and the disruptions were most commonly due to vascular access, cardiac events, and infections, and they lasted a mean of 1 month. Our modality survival is I think, quite robust, perhaps surprisingly robust. So we had about 60% 1-year survival on the modality, and about 50% 2-year survival. So I think that compares similar to, let's say, PD or nocturnal hemo. These data are censored for patients who had positive transitions, so people who went to transplant or home dialysis modality were censored. We tried to predict 6-month modality survival using univariate predictors initially, and then we took the most likely univariate predictors and plugged them into a multivariate model. We only had 43 patients, so our power to predict was not huge, but there is a signal that increased frailty, so being at least moderately frail on the frailty index, or perm cath dialysis access might be signals that will be borne out if we have higher numbers in the future. So here's our conclusions. The INHD allowed improvements to subjective well-being and enhanced scheduling freedom for our patients. So it was a patient-centered program, and I think that part of it worked well. The benefits that we saw were partially offset by trouble sleeping, and some of the patients who had trouble sleeping had to come off the program. And commuting difficulties, in particular, first thing in the morning when you're coming off the 0600 or 0630, it's hard to get home. About 10% of our dialysis runs that were scheduled were missed because of the issues I outlined. And the tablet burden was quite marked, that it improved a lot. Wait times were initially long, and now they're better. And our modality survival was pretty good, I think. And the reasons for discharge, as you'd expect, were mostly because of sleeping problems, vascular access problems, and changes in medical status. And so, although we didn't have statistically significant predictors of modality failure, I think the data generates the hypothesis that increased frailty and possibly perm cath use might be predicted when we plug them into larger data sets in the future. Just wanted to thank again Mark Saunders, who collected all the data. Dan Morton-Newson did study design and data analysis. Doctors Ayab Akbari and Ted Clark in Ottawa were collaborators. Anna Hill supported the project and helped us get Provincial Renal Agency funding for Mark, and so we thank the PRA and Anna as well. And we'll pass on the questions for now because I'm way over time. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Julia and Dr. Schachter. I'll just call on Dr. Landsberg now, who's going to speak for Vancouver Coastal.
Good morning again. So I'm presenting this on behalf of Vancouver Coastal because that's the home health authority where I do my transplant work, but this is actually very, very much a provincial project, and it's a collaboration between BC Transplant and PRA, which I think is a fantastic opportunity. I'm presenting on behalf of our working group, and I'll show you the working group, but I particularly want to thank Janet Williams, who's sitting right in front of me, but she's kept her head down. Janet maybe I didn't, and Claire Bannon, I don't see Claire, who are been really tremendously helpful with our steering committee. So this is about living donation. So deceased donation is thriving at the moment, and I am confident that it will continue to thrive. And no matter how much I advocate for living donation, I realize that not everybody's going to get a living donor transplant. However, if you can get a living donor transplant, it provides some significant advantages. And just to remind you, the ability to get a transplant before you start dialysis. You don't go on the waiting list until you're on dialysis for a deceased donor. The only way to get a preemptive transplant, a transplant before dialysis, is with a living donor. Even if you're on dialysis, the fastest way to get a transplant is to get a living donor. And the bottom line is that outcomes are better. So how much better do you think they are? No longer 1 to 3 years, 3 to 8 years, 8 to 12 years, or more than 12 years. And this is just, an average. So most people said 3 to 8. I'll give you another second to let those register. So, I showed you our survival curves before. This is, shows about a 10% difference out to 10 years in terms of the outcome. But, it's hard to get stats that really are reliable, because to look at long-term successes, you need to look at people who were transplanted a long time ago. This is probably the most optimistic number I can see, which shows you a 12% difference, a 12-year difference. But I think it's fair to say 8 to 12. I tell patients on average, I think a living donor transplant is going to last 10 years longer than a deceased donor transplant. I not only am passionate and advocate for living donor transplant in BC, but I'm also the chair of the Canadian Blood Services Living Donor Committee, and we had a workshop in Toronto in November where I proposed this vision for living donor transplant for the country, and by 2025 we want to reach 30 per million. Now, that's a stretch goal. Our rate right now, which is flat, is at 15 per million, and I already showed you our BC rate, which has been good. We've been almost close to 30 per million in 2013. We're now closer to about 22 per million. So I'm going to keep it simple for us. We're going to get the idea out, no matter how many we do, that for those patients who are eligible, a preemptive kidney transplant is their best treatment, and that should be applied to patients in their patient journey along the road, so that when they come to the need for renal replacement, the renal replacement is a new kidney. So right now, how well are we doing? So what percentage of our patients are getting living donor transplants are getting them done preemptively? So we're not as bad as you think. We're not doing. You guys think we're like we're really lame, but we're not that lame. But we can do better. So right now, about 30%, 30 to 40% of our transplants are preemptive, which actually leads the country. So we're doing a good job already. Those are the darkest bars in the bottom, and so we're a little bit over 30%. But if you do a small number, if you do 10 transplants in a year and 5 of them are preemptive, well, that's 50%. That's great, but that's not necessarily success. So what we want to do is get more done and get more done preemptively. So how are we going to do it? We're going to do it together. So this is where we need everybody's help. This is the partnership. There's a kidney care clinic working group chaired by Monica. Monica has done a great job in terms of her leadership in getting this out to the kidney care clinics. But so we're going to move the process of patient identification and education about living donor into the kidney care clinics, and the focus is transplant first. Transplant's your best option, and how are you going to get that done? You're going to get it done with a living donor. We're going to help you find a living donor. So this is our transplant working group, which you can see have representatives from across the province, from the kidney care clinics across the province, and we're going to accomplish it in a multi-pronged way. Lots of stuff. So the KCC journey map has been altered to better reflect transplant as the preferred treatment option. BC Transplant has we've revamped our website. We've made it easier to navigate. And there's a lot of information on our living donor website, and so this is for patients and for donors, and there are videos, there are patient testimonials as well about this, and it's translated. So we have a Punjabi version and a Chinese version, and we even have some videos in other languages. And you can see one of our media stars who doubles as a transplant nephrologist, a handsome guy, Jag Gill. He goes by Jagbeer today for this because he's speaking in Punjabi. So we really feel that some of our ethnic communities have been underrepresented in their ability to get living donor transplants, and we'd really like to help that. So we have posters, we have a partnership with Kidney Foundation, which I think is fantastic and cutting edge. We had a day in June where 12 previous living donors spent the day getting mentoring training. I spent some time there with them. They're passionate. They're anxious to help. They're proud promoters of living donation, and they're now available across the province to people who want their support. So the biggest thing is they ask, how are you going to do this? How are you going to get somebody to help you? We have a number of tools now available, which in order to a sample letter, some training about how to ask, and we've also trying to standardize the training so everybody in the KCCs has good knowledge about this so they can talk about living donation and actually feel good about it. So this is some of our brochures, some of our poster, some of our handouts. A big part of this is going to require some really kickoff and a point person, and so with the RRP funding, we've been able to have a position funded for a half-time position for 1 year, and this is funding for a transplant first coordinator. And so Carolyn Jarvis, who is the social worker who's been working in the living donor program at Vancouver General Hospital, is going to be working in this position half-time for the next year. And Carolyn is going to be your point person. So Carolyn, would you mind standing up and just so everybody can see you? Now Carolyn will be at the BC Transplant booth throughout the day, and I want to everybody know that they're welcome to shake her hand and start to do some networking. We're also, there's an algorithm now for transitions, as we've been talking about, and we're going to study this and document it, and we're going to use PROMIS as the charting system. So Carolyn's got, I got everything Carolyn's going to do. She's going to come to the patient's home. She's going to talk to them about transplant. They're going to drive over to the donor's home. No, I mean, so I have a lot of tools here, but she's going to work with you. She is going to hopefully make you feel comfortable about living donation, develop some really novel tools to assist in the ask, that big ask. Going to meet with patients and develop some focus groups to see how we can do it better. And I really feel that with this, you know, our stretch goal of meeting, you know, our stretch goal for Canada by 2025, doing 30 per million. So remembering that we're optimists here, that we are already operating in a pretty evolved system where we're at 22 or 23 or 24 per million. In 5 years, where do you think we can get? So there's no right or wrong here. I really believe we can go past. I personally believe we can stay past 30. I believe that our living donor rate can maintain. We can maintain the highest living donor rate in the country while now having an outstanding, if not the best, deceased donor rate as well. And maybe we can get to the point where, you know, dialysis, you know, beyond dialysis, and our wait times are really, you know, significantly lower than those pretty good slides I've shown you before. So, do I have a minute for questions? Thanks. So living donor first, talk to Carolyn, talk to me, talk to anybody in our committee. Owen from Vancouver General is here as well, who's, you know, this is a team approach.
So I'm pleased, can everyone hear me? There we are. Thanks to the person who's tech savvy and submitted the first question there. So the first question is, at what percentage GFR do you do preemptive transplantation?
So it's not one size fits all. You know, some people feel fantastic, are slowly progressing, and they feel fantastic when their GFR is 18. They feel fantastic when it's 16. Even when they're down to 12, they say, I feel really good. I say to people, you know, if you have symptoms, we'll do it. when you're under 20, because if you're over 20 and you have symptoms, I'm not sure that those symptoms are actually because of your kidney failure, and then maybe we don't want to set up unrealistic expectations that you're going to feel better. But if you're under 20 with symptoms, or I would say, like when you're down to 10, you got a living donor, they're ready to go, you get a cold, you might be on dialysis. So let's just say arbitrarily, even if you're feeling great, let's go with 10.
If I may be greedy to ask a question then, what's the turnaround time? Once you identify somebody is ready to go, they're symptomatic, how quickly can you get them into the OR, presuming
right now, I think at both programs, we're operating on about, we're booking about 10 weeks ahead. So, so if you say, today I'm ready, I'd like you to sort of be a little bit ready before today, say, well, I'm getting to the point where I'm ready. So, give us 3 months probably realistically to, from the time we say, let's book it, because, we want to have some waiting time. We don't want to not fill our OR days. I'm confident that if we grow it, we will get an additional OR support so that we will be able to maintain that at about around 10 weeks, I would say.
I think we all look forward to getting those program supports and that skill set. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
I'm pleased to welcome Wanda Dean from Northern Health, University Hospital of Northern BC, and she's going to speak to us about the hemodialysis transition unit. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Sorry, I haven't done this before, so I don't know where my slides are. So I'm really excited, thank you, and I see the clock ticking. Really excited to be here this morning and to share with you some of the work that we're doing in our transition unit project. And I'm guessing this moves the slide. Okay, so I just want to give you some background and sort of put us geography where we are. Is if you see the nice blue slide, the blue piece at the top, that's Northern Health. So as you notice, we are 2/3 of the province land mass, but we have only about 300,000 people. So we have a big area, a small program, and the star is where Prince George is, and that's where I work out of. We're called UHNBC, so University Hospital of Northern British Columbia, and we're an in-center unit. So for a sense of how big our program is our in-center unit is located in Prince George. That's where all our new start patients, that's where the interdisciplinary team is located. We have 2 CDUs, and they have about 40 patients between the 2 of them. One's in the northeast and one's in the northwest. And distance is, depending on the weather, sometimes it's 5 to 6 to 7 to 8 hours for those patients to come to our units. So quite a bit of travel time there. And we have 54 PD patients, and that's actually 10 patients increase since January. So our PD program is really busy. And we have 26 independent home hemodialysis patients, and those patients could be in our independent unit or doing home hemodialysis in their homes. And our CKD program, when I checked in with them on Monday, they said they had 699 patients registered. So really close to 700. So where the transition unit project started was, it was a challenge that was identified by our staff nurses. So we, in Prince George, only have an in-center unit. So we don't have a CDU, we have an in-center unit. And some of the staff notice our healthy patients who are still dialyzing in our in-center unit. And they worry about them that, the more that they stay in-center, the more they become comfortable with what happens in center. The nurse becomes the expert. The focus becomes on illness instead of wellness. And so staff and the leadership team were really worried about, how can we help these people move towards a journey of independence? And so it's a really kind of a cool project, is that's where it started, is the staff are saying, we're really concerned about our folks and how can we help them move along in their journey in their kidney disease. So So the project, that's where it started, and we needed a purpose to say where are we going with our project. So this is sort of our purpose statement, is that the purpose of the transition unit is to support patients' transition of their renal replacement therapy to independence. So broad statement, and why it's a broad statement is in this project, there's sort of two parts. So the first part is we want to, because all of the new starts happen in Prince George, that's where the interdisciplinary team is, and we are small enough that we actually don't have a navigation nurse role. So all our patients, so the new starts in particular, we're worried that somehow maybe we've missed some of them. So two pieces of this project. One of them is that we're having a nursing assessment of all new start patients to determine how we can move them towards their journey of independence. So if they're assessed that they're going to move on to PD, then we quickly mobilize them to get the catheter inserted. Our program is small, so we don't have bedside insertions, we have surgical insertions. So to move those people, to give them some information about PD and to move them quickly on that journey, this project has been quite helpful in that mode. And because the other piece is that used to be done by our PD team, which is a 1.8 FTE for 54 patients, and they're training patients very quickly. So they had previously done this work with the PD patients, and now they were finding they were a little bit pinched for time. So as a project nurse, I have been doing that work, and the good part of that is a year ago I was a PD nurse, and so I'm doing a lot of the work with moving our patients towards PD. So that's a piece of it. I'm not going to speak more to that. What my focus mostly is going to be is about our unit. So once our patients have been assessed that they're not going to go on to PD, but home hemodialysis might be an option for them, we're trying to transition them into our unit as quickly as we can so they don't develop that sickness feeling, and they do have still is they're managing a chronic disease, but with a focus of wellness is our intention. So if you have been to this meeting or been associated with a renal community for a year, you will know that in Northern Health, for the most part, we have been early adopters of home dialysis. Some of our data, so in 2005, we started an in-center self-care unit, and somehow the language then kind of morphed to, it was called limited care, and I always wondered about that limited care when our patients look at that name and say, what does that mean? Are we not getting as much care? But anyways, it's just kind of, that's the language we use, and it's the language we use mostly about the physical space. So 2005 started self-care unit, and then in 2008 moved that self-care unit off-site into a Parkwood shopping center, and that's currently our Northern Independent Hemodialysis Unit, which is very successful. Some of the folks who work in home hemo, new home hemo nurses, are coming actually up there to do some training on the machines, and if you had an opportunity to be there, it's a really wonderful place. And so then we have a quick arrow there, and then we have the transition unit project, which we started in April. And in between there, we've had amazing work done. The work that we're doing with this transition unit is just an adjunct to the current work that's been done. Okay, I have a video here. How do I get the video to play? They'll play it, okay. Oh. Okay, so what this video is, it's just a quick show of, this is our in-center unit, and what I want to do is just take you a quick little journey down the hallway. So in-center unit, 12 chairs, 2 extra isolation rooms, and now we're just walking down the hallway, and why I want you to see this is our physical space that we have the transition unit. And this was also where the Williams Lake patients and nurses worked out of. Yay! They've called it Little Williams Lake. So now it's not limited care, Little Williams Lake. So it's a nice area away from the noise of the in-center unit, but still attached to the in-center unit. So when I'm talking to current patients and saying, you know, why don't you come down to our unit? Some of them have various reasons why they don't want to come down. Some of them have become accustomed to being in-center, but to say, you know, we're just down the hallway, we're quiet, you still have access to the same resources. It's a wonderful place that it's quiet, it's bright, and we can do some work with them, as well as they don't feel like they've been disconnected from the team. So we started the project in April. We've had a couple starts and stops. We've had some staffing, summer crunch, as well as Williams Lake came, and for the longest time I joked that they were my project, because my official first day when I was in this role was actually the day that they started dialyzing our unit, and so that used to always be my joke, because they're my project now. So we've had about 3 months of when we've actually had the unit open. So the unit is open 3 days a week, and we're running 2 patients a day just in the morning, and we have 2-to-1 staffing ratio. And so part of the challenge is a small unit. Dialysis nurses, we're, again, a small group, takes a lot of training to get to a level of expertise to feel comfortable working here. So how do you staff this unit? A pilot project, really difficult. So lots of discussions about how to staff it. And so the problem of staffing it was turned into a challenge to say, well, we have nurses who are really interested in learning. The majority of our staff have their CNF. So we decided that what we would do is we would give the nurses, the in-center nurses, an opportunity to work in this unit. And then we'd give them some education, develop their skills in moving patients toward independence. And so it became a successful, and hopefully that will then, when the project is over, is create our sustainability piece of it. So our nurses had some online courses. There's a terrific online course called Teaching Patient Self-Management Techniques by the American Kidney Foundation, and it's a 1-hour course, and then also the bonus with that is our staff who are then CNF certified, they get a certificate after they take that course, and then that's one more piece of working towards keeping their certification current. Also, so the project nurse role, I'm currently in that role. It ends on March 1st. And in that, what we've developed, because we know when we're working with patients, moving them towards self-care and independence, we need some consistency. And so created a lot of literature, checklists for the patient, where we've modified the Renal Agency independent dialysis patient workbook for use. We've established nursing practice guidelines. And then to contribute to our staff having confidence in that role is we're trying to assign them for a solid chunk of time so they feel like they can develop those relationships with the patients, and also to develop their skills in teaching patients and working with them and moving them towards independence. So what have we learned? Okay, we've learned my slides are done. There should be another. Okay, so what we have learned through this project is that when we created our patient journey map to develop this unit was when the nursing is doing the assessment for all our new patients, is we have a question, is the patient moving towards independence, and it's a yes or a no, and then we've added in our PROCEP map a not yet. And so those are the folks that maybe those are the ones who settle into our unit, and they weren't ready when we initially did all the work with them. And then you know how sometimes those patients sometimes get lost in the shuffle, or they start to feel too nervous of ever moving towards independence. So we've created a not yet category to go back and reassess those patients and spend some time with them and see if we can't move them on towards independent dialysis. And where we hope to be at project end, so we hope to be able to have a sustaining model that our staff will still be able to feel comfortable working in that unit. And when patients, when they spend time in our transition unit, then from there we're hoping to move them to the Parkwood Independent unit. And as currently we've had, in 3 months, we've had 6 patients move through. We have 4 patients who have graduated to Parkwood. We have 2 patients, depending on the journey that they're on, have decided that they're in the not yet category. But even though they haven't moved on to independent dialysis, what they have done is they've done things like had insight into their fluid intake and some of their medication regimes. And I still see them in the unit and they talk to me, you know what, I'm less than a liter up this time. So it's never, even though they didn't graduate to independence, what they gained is still a huge success, and that's really important. So just to have a question here, so what's the provincial target for percentage of patients participating in independent dialysis? Excellent. So that's right. So the target is greater or equal to or greater than 35%. And if you read the literature that is out there from PRA, they will say that that is a robust target, and there's a lot of work that goes into meeting those targets. And I just want to Oh.
Yeah, it just takes a second.
Okay. Okay. Anyways, my next slide was to brag about in Northern Health that our current target is we have achieved 38.8% in patients with independent. And I had one more polling question, but it's maybe not on there. So my other polling question was just to, as a take-home for you, is to go back to your health authorities and ask what your target numbers are and what you can do in your daily practice to move your patients towards reaching a stage of independence in their dialysis care.
I'm going to ask you a question.
Okay.
I know we're actually over, but I just think this is so important. If you had to pick one thing, why do you think you've been so successful? Because I think we need to capture your energy somehow. How you
In our
got so many-
independence rate.
Yeah.
So some people will say it's because of your geography. If you have a person who lives 8 hours away, they're not going to choose an in-center modality. They don't want to be in a CDU. They want to stay in their home community. And that is true. And I wish I would have crunched the numbers last night as I'm not sleeping and worried about what I'm going to say today. But the surprising is the amount of people who live in Prince George who could come, who are still doing independent modalities. We have a huge amount, great deal. Our PD nurses here, what percentage of PD patients are from Prince George? A huge amount. I would say 60% of our PD patients live in Prince George. Yeah, and home hemodialysis. So we have 16 home hemodialysis patients. Some of those are in Prince George, and then we have 10 in our Parkwood Independent Unit. So those are people who are doing home hemodialysis, but for some reason can't do it in their home. So those are all Prince George people who have chosen, to do independent care. Yeah. And they're self-cannulating, they're stringing their machines, they're doing all of the care. They have a nurse there for backup support, but they're independent patients. Thank you.
For our next speaker from Interior Health, I'd like to welcome Kim McDuff, and Kim's going to speak to us on transplant dermatology assessment.
Just in case, thank you. Oh, great, thank you. Okay. Good morning. So just bear with me. I don't normally do these presentations, so this is a first for me. But one of the initiatives that we're doing in Kelowna was in our post-transplant clinic, and it was the initiation of the Kelowna Post-Transplant Dermatology Clinic. We started this project just recently in June 21st of this year, so it's sort of a brand new initiative for us. So I'll just share with you briefly a bit about what we've done so far. We don't have results or anything like that yet, but we'll talk a little bit about what we've done to get started. So first we'll just mention about some of our statistics for Interior Health. So we have a population of about 743,000, and within that I'll just focus sort of on what we have for post-transplant recipients. So within IH we have 376 post-transplant recipients that are kidney transplants, and kidney pancreas combined is 24. That was as of January this year. So then I thought I'd just focus a little bit on the Kelowna transplant in particular, since that's where this project is taking place. So we have about 170 post-transplant recipients that we follow there, predominantly kidney transplant, but also some kidney pancreas. And just on this map, I sort of wanted to show how far away our patients come from. So they can come as far away from Salmon Arm, Revelstoke, Grand Forks, even Vernon, and then I would say approximately 40% of our patients live in the Kelowna area. So the reason that we wanted to get started with this dermatology clinic was that we have some challenges in terms of providing post-transplant dermatology care within IH. And I'm not going to go into the background, but generally it's just accepted that post-transplant patients have an increased risk for skin cancer, and so we want to provide proper surveillance for that. So one of our biggest challenges within IH is lack of dermatologists. So currently, and unless it's changed in the last couple of months, we only have one dermatologist in Kelowna, and that dermatologist works part-time. Recently also, she had mentioned that she, at that time, 3 months ago, when I had spoken with her, she was the only dermatologist in interior health. So we definitely have some challenges. She's let us know that it's difficult for her to keep up with the referrals that she's receiving from throughout the region. One of the other difficulties we have was just coordinating our dermatologist appointments with our post-transplant clinic appointments for the patients that are coming from out of town, from Salmon Arm and Revelstoke areas. So once we determined that, we had decided that we wanted to do something that would increase our skin surveillance for our post-transplant patients. And our goal was basically just to increase capacity within IH for post-transplant skin assessment and then follow-up care. So in order to do that, we first developed a team that we would have for this transplant dermatology clinic. We were fortunate enough to have the St. Paul's transplant dermatology team come to Kelowna in October of 2015, and they provided us an education session in the morning, and then in the afternoon, they actually conducted a clinic with us, and we brought patients, post-transplant recipients from all over IH to be seen by the dermatologist, and they basically at that point in time sort of showed us what a clinic could look like. So from there, we sort of isolated what our team members could be to start up. So we started with trying to secure a physician. And so we were really fortunate in that we got Dr. Henry Doherty, to join our team. And he is a GP that lives in Kelowna, and he's worked in the cancer clinic in Kelowna since the year 2000. And he has a Master's of Medicine in skin cancer. So he was on board. He actually attended the education session that St. Paul's had provided for us, and so we were able to begin communications with him, talking about this need, and he was quite willing and keen to step forward and help us work on this. So we also were able to secure funding from BCPRA, which we want to really thank you for that. And through that, we've got funding for a year. So we were able to secure one of the post-transplant RNs to be assigned to the dermatology clinic each time we're having a clinic. And then we also have, at this point, we're having the clerk work with us. She's our post-transplant clerk already, and she assists with our appointment bookings and our patient receivings, which helps us greatly in terms of organizing that clinic. So just wanted to talk a little bit about what the skin clinic structure is right now. So right now we're running clinics one morning a month, and they're from 8 in the morning till 12 o'clock. We run the clinic concurrently with our regular post-transplant clinic. So the patients come in, and first they have their skin assessment done with Dr. Doherty and myself, and then after that they go on to just carry on with the rest of their renal team visits as they would have done for the post-transplant clinic visit regularly. At this point, we're able to schedule the appointments for every 15 minutes. We are conducting this clinic in the same area that we have all of our renal clinics. So at the same time, there can be other clinics going on. So we have borrowed space from some of our colleagues. So we're thankful to them for giving us some of this space so that we have 2 rooms going, which allows us to have the appointments scheduled for every 15 minutes. So far, patients have told us that the flow of the clinic has gone quite well. We've managed to see 10 to 12 patients in each clinic so far. To date, we've just done 3 clinics, so we are pretty new at this. We're still learning, and we're kind of getting our structure in place. So at this point in time, the services that we're providing is basically, as I kind of alluded to before, we're providing a full skin assessment. So the patients get into a gown, and Dr. Doherty does a head-to-toe skin assessment. If he identifies anything at that point in time that looks like it requires a biopsy, we're able to do that. We'll do the biopsy right then. If they're requiring any other types of care, then we will put in a referral to a higher level of care at that point in time. So we're going to collect some data. Because we're only 3 clinics into it, we don't have any data at this point in time, but I just thought I'd put some highlights of some of the things that we're going to look at. So we're going to capture the number of skin assessments that have been completed. We're also doing a bit of a historical data compilation in terms of asking patients questions in a questionnaire such as how many times have you had a full skin assessment done? Are they done regularly? Who's been providing that for you up to this point in time? Other things, we're going to keep track of skin biopsies done, any skin cancers that maybe we have identified through those biopsies, and then the number of referrals that we send to higher care. We're going to track patient satisfaction with the skin assessment clinic, and we're going to do that by using a survey that we've developed, and we're going to conduct we have started conducting a telephone interview that we do after they've had their first skin assessment with Dr. Doherty. I'm just starting this, so I plan to conduct probably 20 to 30, but we'll do as many as we can. And I can just say that so far, the patient response to this clinic has been overwhelmingly positive. We've had to ask them to come into clinic earlier than they usually plan to, which people traveling from out of town, that's a bit of a challenge for them, but they've been more than willing to come because they know that the access to this has been somewhat scarce. We do also have some patients now, and it seems to be a growing number that don't have GPs in our area, so that's been a bit of a challenge in terms of finding GPs to provide the skin assessment. So next time we'll let you know what we found out from our results. That's really all I was going to share with you about the clinic for now. The acknowledgements is we'd just like to thank BCPRI very much for funding this one-year pilot project. And we want to thank St. Paul's dermatology team for taking the time to come to Kelowna and have that education day and provide that clinic for us. That was really the catalyst that got us started, realized that this was something that we could do. Definitely Dr. Doherty for stepping up and being willing to come and give this a try. And Dr. Michaud for her help with that, and the KGH Renal team and transplant team for sure. Whoops. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kim.
Thank you.
We have time for a couple of questions. Any questions from the audience? I haven't been asking about the podium, but we've got one left from VIHA, and perhaps I'll ask that person who posed that question to approach the VIHA speakers independently. Just musing about this program, I think you're so lucky to have it. I suspect the whole province is under service for dermatology, and I know certainly in Island Health it's been a real struggle to try to attract new people. But the idea of having immediate biopsy access at the time of clinic is just fantastic.
Yeah, and we've only done a few so far, so we're still trying to figure out how to fit that in. But sometimes we've had a few situations where the patient had the skin assessment and it was actually determined that they needed greater than 3 biopsies done. And at that point, we opted to conduct another appointment for them just because of the time that would be involved when we're on sort of a strict timeline. So we're still working on that. Hopefully we can expand that, but the patients, so far the feedback about that has been overwhelmingly positive. They're very happy to be able to come to one clinic and be seen by dermatology, get the biopsy if they need, and then be able to see the rest of the team. Also increases our communication between nephrology and the person who's doing the skin assessment, so we can have talks about maybe medication dosing and that kind of thing as well, which is, you know, a real-time communication, whereas before we were relying on reports coming back and forth from the dermatologist office. So.
That's great. Hopefully we can get an update next
Great.
week. Okay, good.
Thank you
so much.